Yes.
Okay. One more time. And so we're going to do a sync. So, okay, everybody's in the same place. All right. This is a video for our friend Heath, who lives on his boat. And when we last spoke with Heath, we found that he lives mostly on canned foods. In fact, he had bought $400 of Amy's organic chili. So what we're going to do for Heath is we're going to make the most simple bread possible. And so anyone else who's watching, this is the most simple bread that can be. In fact, because Heath is healthier than perhaps I am, we're going to make it out of whole wheat flour, water, salt, and yeast. And that's all. Now this is some yeast we have left. Now you'll see yeast in little tiny envelopes, which cost generally about $1 a piece. And you'll also can buy it in the supermarket for about 3 ounces for about $6. Don't buy those. What you want to do is you want to go to Sam's or Costco or Winco and buy this. This is a 1-pound brick, which is 16 ounces. And we generally pay about between $3.50 and $4. Last time we bought it was 2016. It's 2017 right now. But we would buy 2 of these at Sam's for $7 or 1 of these for $4 a piece. And we're using, oh golly gee, I don't know how much we're using, less than 1/2 ounce per loaf of bread we're making. I think it's 1/4 ounce is generally what you use. Now, what we're going to do is count out 3 cups of flour. Now, we're Americans, and so unlike the rest of the world, we actually count dry ingredients in volume, where the rest of the world wisely counts it in weight, because how much flour in here is a matter of how tightly it's packed, but the weight stays the same. And so we've counted out 3 cups of flour. That's normally what goes into a loaf of bread. And it's about 12 ounces of flour. The amount of yeast you add can vary. You can add 1/2 teaspoon of yeast in here, and it'll still work. It'll just take longer to rise. We started using a bread machine on the road to perdition, and so we use a tablespoon of yeast. That's actually a lot more than is necessary, but it's what I've gotten used to using. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of salt. And on the boat, we keep salt in a container because the salt shaker just never seems to work. And with things about salt that are interesting, that's about a teaspoon, is that the more salt you add, the slower the yeast rises because it inhibits the growth of the yeast. So that's all it. That's it. We're about to add some water, and that's everything that goes into making bread. It's as simple as you can get. And we're going to do this without a stove. I mean, that's what's going to be interesting, is that we're not going to use this. We're going to use a stove. We're not going to use an oven. Heath doesn't have an oven, and the first bunch of years that we sailed, we didn't have an oven either. Now, you could measure the flour, and no doubt you should. Measure the water, no doubt you should, but I tend not to. Now, the amount of water you're going to use is going to vary by the shape of the bread, because the surface area of the bread is going to impact how much of the water is going to evaporate. Also the oven, lots of things. Now, things about bread. What makes bread rise is gluten. And so you've got yeast, which is causing carbon monoxide as it respirates. It's also giving off alcohol as a byproduct. So if you're making making beer or wine or distilled alcohol, you're using yeast because you're interested in the alcohol it's giving off. We're not interested in the alcohol. We're interested in the carbon dioxide. And what makes this stick together, and you're going to watch it transform as we start to knead it, is the gluten, because the gluten traps the carbon monoxide and you get bubbles. So what you can do, because we can use other flours like rye flour or buckwheat flour, which doesn't have any gluten to trap, we'll add gluten. But then you ask, well, what about gluten-free breads? I mean, they're the rage and people are making them. They use other things to trap the carbon dioxide. They use generally gums. Xanthan gum is the most popular. And so you have a gum which is acting to trap all of the carbon dioxide. So all we're going to do is we have this, and you see people kneading it on a board. We're on a boat. We want to make as little mess as possible. We're not going to get mess all over the place. So now we're just going to knead it by hand. And this is a fairly wet dough, maybe a little too wet. But what will happen in the next 10 minutes, and you're not going to stand here and watch it for 10 minutes, is the gluten will come out. So you can see it's actually starting to get pulley. And in the next 10 minutes, while we do this, it's going to transform itself from this, what was shaggy, and now sort of lumpy and not behaving itself. And in 10 minutes by the clock, we are going to have a very smooth, pulley bread. Now, there's no fat in this. You saw that the only thing that's in here is salt, water, flour, and yeast. Breads can have all sorts of ingredients in them, and I make some breads that require 10 different ingredients to go in them. But the major ingredient that's generally added to bread is fat. And you can have butter and olive oil and whatever type of fat, lard, whatever appeals to you. They all have different flavors, they have some different characteristics, but you don't really care. Now the fat does a couple things. The major one that we're interested in, we're going to try and sop up some of the flour that we left behind, is the fat keeps it from going stale. This bread will go stale in a day. And that's one of the things to remember, because the water will just evaporate in it, and there's nothing liquid left behind when it goes, and you end up with remarkably hard, stale bread very, very quickly. A plastic bag will solve that, but it's something to remember. But the simplest thing you can make. Now, other things you hear about is what happens if you don't have much yeast and you want to keep it going, or what about the famous guys, the 49ers, given we're up in Gold Rush territory. We were just in Skagway. There's sourdough. Sourdough's pretty easy. You keep a piece of the dough, and you feed it occasionally with extra flour and water, and the yeast will stay alive. You can keep that going forever. It'll get a characteristic sour smell. And in fact, when I was first doing sourdoughs, the moment it would get that smell, I would throw it away because I thought it went bad. If it goes bad, it'll turn black because the different bacteria will invade it. You can see it changing. It's starting to come together. And we'll keep this up for 10 minutes. You could do this on a counter, but we're doing it this way.
May I take here?
We'll take care of it, Hillary. Just give me another 6 minutes with this.
And I would sit here and just sit
Hillary.
and...
Yep, it's okay. So what's happening here is it's changing texture. Gives you good forearms, good strong hands, but if you're a sailor, from pulling ropes and splicing, you have that anyway. See, change. You'll find various other ways of doing this. No-knead bread, where you don't knead the bread. It's also popular, you just let it sit. So you mix it, generally those have a large amount of water in them, and you leave it. After 24 hours, all of the gluten has been come to life and been stretched and what have you, and you bake those. Generally, when I've done that, you bake it in a very, very hot oven, and that dries off the water quickly. Use a very hot container, and you get a marvelous crust. We're not going to do anything that interesting in some ways, and much more interesting in others. We're going to make rolls, and we're going to cook those on top of the stove. Now, generally, you raise dough twice. When you raise it the second time, you get a finer loaf of bread, the holes tend to be more uniform. And in white bread, even the color of the bread changes a little bit. It seems to get whiter when you raise it a second time, and I can't explain why. We're going to do a single rise. So we're going to get the bread all kneaded, and then rather than raise it twice, we're just going to raise it once. So we're going to immediately shape it into rolls, put it into a frying pan, and let it rise. And then when they're risen, we're going to start cooking them. And after 15 or 20 minutes, we'll have rolls. Rolls! We're going to make rolls for dinner. Yeah. You can see it's changing. Now, I have made the mistake of grabbed the wrong flour and tried to do this with rye. And of course, rye has no gluten. No matter what you do, it'll never get pulley like this.
And now I don't even know
Hillary's on the boat with us, as you can hear, and she's got her own concerns. You can hear her talking about them in the background.
I don't think I'm on Instagram.
And you can hear our dock mates walking by.
What?
Oh, there's some people on another boat that are walking by. It looks like they intended to go fishing, but the rain may drive them away. So, you can add acid, and in fact, on some bread machines, you'll see that, in some bread machines, you'll see their recipe has you adding a little bit of vinegar. We make ricotta. And it's not real ricotta. I mean, the recipes call it ricotta, but ricotta is recooked. And it's a byproduct of some other processes making cheese, I think. But what we do is we add an acid. Generally, we use a combination of some yogurt. So we're getting the acid that comes from making yogurt. And then we add lime juice. And that interacts with the proteins in the milk. They drop in and drop out of the suspension. And what you end up with is ricotta dropping out of suspension. And what you're left over, which I guess is technically the way, is rather acidic. And we use that when we make bread. And we use it specifically in some very dark breads where we have very little gluten in them, and it helps it rise higher. Here we go. We're about done here. I think our 10 minutes are up.
This has been recording for 14 minutes.
Yes, I think our 10 minutes are up. Okay, so we're going to set this here. I'm going to wash my hands, and we're going to make some rolls and put them in a frying pan. Single rise. It's interesting. It's a Tramontina frying pan made in the U.S. I guess they want to stand Italian. This is a non-stick. I'm very, very impressed with the surface. It's a real non-stick surface. The problem with it as a frying pan is if you look, it's curved. This is a stamped frying pan. And a good commercial frying pan can't be stamped because this curve comes up and it actually goes back in a little bit. So it allows you to fry things and to shake them and have them come back. But that can't be stamped. It has to be turned. And so they're more expensive. So this is an inexpensive frying pan we bought at Sam's. And as a result, it won't do some things a good commercial one. So we're going to add some flour so it doesn't stick to my hands too much. We're going to gather this together. Now we're going to use a little bit of fat here, but for not what you think, it's fat that you're going to have lying around. What we're going to do is coat this non-stick frying pan with a little bit of cooking spray. You can use any fat you want, or no fat at all. No fat at all, they'll stick a little bit, but you have to pry them out. And that's it. And so we're going to take the dough, and we're going to get, I don't know how many rolls we're going to get out of this. Let's try 6. And we'll cut each of these into 3. And you could just pull this if you want apart if you wanted rather than cut it, but we're cutting. We didn't actually go down all the way. I went and bumped that camera. So I have some continuity issues. And we're going to form rolls and just pop them in here like this. We probably easily could have done 8 rolls rather than the 6 we've done. But we're going to have 6 very large rolls. Why didn't I do 8? I have no idea why I didn't do 8. Because 8's actually easier. You can just keep doing halves. And this way I have to do thirds. And I'm going to end up with rolls that are not all the same size. Here we go. And one of the ways it's typically done is you take the roll and you pull it so you get a smooth top and you pop it in. And we're getting some oddly sized rolls. And this one's going to be bigger than the others. Okay, now we cover these and let them rise. We'll cover them with a plate. One of the things you can do, which I've gotten in the habit of doing, is spraying the top of them. There's no need to, but it keeps them from drying out. Although covering them with the plate will do it. When we were originally planning this shoot, we wanted to use time-lapse, so we would have left them uncovered. But our GoPro has decided to run out of battery. So all we're going to do is take these, cover them, and let them rise. We're going to come back in 45 minutes and see if they're ready. We'll know they're ready when we push on them and they don't spring back. And that's it. We're just going to let that sit exactly where it is for 45 minutes. So we've been letting this rise about 45 minutes later. And we have cheated. We've checked this to make sure it looked good. These are done. If you touch them, you'll find that the place that we've touched stays there. So they're ready to be risen, or to be cooked. All we're going to do is light the stove. And we're working on a kerosene Taylor stove, about which we have many mixed feelings. And we're going to light the stove, and over a low heat, we are going to cook the rolls. Now this is a classic boat galley, so everything is small and tight together, and under our work surface is the stove. In a few seconds the yellow flame will die down, then we'll turn the heat down and put the rolls on to cook. So we're going to turn the heat way, way down. Like this. Then we're going to put the rolls on. Cover them up. And let them cook. We're going to let them cook until they're almost cooked all the way through. Then turn them upside down and let them cook the rest of the way. If we've done this properly, they should be fairly evenly cooked. And we shouldn't see much in the way of a burn mark. So this has been cooking for a while, and these are close to done. What we're going to do is put them onto this plate and flip them over. Now, I must admit, I always have trouble doing this and getting it to work correctly. So we're going to try and get them out onto this plate, like that. And we're going to take them, turn them over, and let them finish cooking. They don't need much time on this side since they're close to done all the way through. And when they are complete, I'm going to put a lid on this and make them, right now they're a little crunchy, which is one way to keep them. And I'm going to do this way to keep the steam in. And in another 5 or 6 minutes, they will be finished. Okay, the rolls are done. We're going to take them out and put them on this pan, on this plate. And there we have rolls. And when we open them up, you'll see that they are quite nice, done rolls. Whole wheat and all that's in them. Well, good. Beautiful. Flour, water, yeast, and salt. 6 Very nice, rolled, ready to be eaten. I've already taken a bite out of one. We'll eat them tonight with probably salmon and mayonnaise, and we'll eat one in just a few moments with butter. Heath, I hope this changes your life as I plan it to. Take care.